In the opposite direction, this is Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who has emerged from wherever she emerges from, to complain about AOC. Now, AOC, in addition to being with a handful of people, Bernie Sanders, Rashida Tlaib, Ro Khanna, Tim Ryan for some of the UBI things that need to happen, Pramila Jayapal, and really a handful of others. And Ilhan Omar, of course, with rent suspension and more. AOC has been, of the fraction of activity in the House and Senate of trying to do constructive policy responses to where we're at. She's also, actually been delivering resources to people in her constituency, which is great PR and a great thing to do. So absolute credit to her for that. And she's been talking about basically what workers need to do during this time and what we need to do for workers during this time. And Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who, as we know, is basically, I don't even know what her previous experience is. She's the daughter of a governor. She's, a kind of grandfathered in sort of trust fund kid who belligerently and deeply off-puttingly lied for Donald Trump for a couple of years, including when, it involved justifying kidnapping and terrorizing children. She never missed a beat as a propagandist for the Trump administration. And here she is talking about what is and isn't out of touch on Fox News, Fox and Friends.
Well, most people would want to go back to work. They want to make a paycheck. AOC is urging a work boycott. Listen to this.
When we talk about this idea of reopening society, only in America does the president, when the president tweets about liberation, does he mean go back to work? When we, have this discussion about going back or reopening, I think a lot of people should just say, no, we're not going back to that. We're not going back to working 70-hour weeks just so that we could put food on the table and not even feel any sort of semblance of security in our lives.
Sarah? This is the same Congresswoman who just last week was celebrating the devastation of the oil and gas industry and the hundreds of thousands of jobs that are tied to that because she hoped it would provide momentum for her Green New Deal. This is also a person who may want to go back to her roots and remember that most Americans, unlike those in Congress, have to show up in order to get paid, and that they don't have the luxury of not doing their job and still being able to provide for her family like she does as a member of Congress. There are people that are really hurting. The president is looking for ways to protect them, to help them. She might want to join in that effort instead of putting people down who are struggling and trying to figure out how best to help their families and provide that food. She might want to go back and remember that when she was a bartender and not a member of Congress, she didn't have that luxury. She had to show up to do her job in order to get a paycheck, and there are millions of Americans that are like that need that paycheck, not just for the money, but also their sense of sanity and their ability to be able to get out and do what they do best, and that's work hard, because that's who the American people are. And her totally out of touch lack of understanding of that is just mind-blowing.
They always love moving in between, either condescendingly and very classically Republican, dismissing her as a bartender or then saying that she's out of touch. I just want to say it's incredible, and don't allow these people to reclaim terms like meaning and purpose and things like that in work. There's a hell of a lot of meaning in people taking labor action and reclaiming decency and power in their lives. That is a form of purpose making. That is a form of meaning making. And, what AOC is saying is we've had an unprecedented global collapse in oil prices. Let's use this as an opportunity to generate millions of new jobs when we're ready to redeploy, redesign the energy economy, which you can make endless amount of economic and capitalist cases for, frankly. And then, yes, attend to the global ecological collapse, which will only make situations like we're in now more likely and increase. But what Sarah Huckabee is talking about in between all that dignity of work stuff is a small business bailout package for Exxon. And, and basically trying to enlist people who have legitimate fears into being, unwitting foot soldiers for Chevron. And it's pathetic.
It's insane. Like, I don't know how people watching could not hear her talking about these giant bailout packages for businesses and not think, oh, maybe they could also afford to pay us to stay home, right? Like these demonstrations that are happening across the country, I do not believe that they have a working class character when I see ladies in SUVs shouting hysterically about how they want to, get their nails done. Trump's base is they're wealthy. They're business owners.
I think it's a multitude of characters. Maybe. I would really watch, actually. Joshua Kahn did a great, I will plug this specifically, where it's going to come up later, an over 20-minute overview of the different constituencies of these protests and also how right-wing protests work generally, because they usually are definitely much more synchronized with like actual governing power. So I think there are multiple constituencies, including people, who are responding to the Cuomo quote. Of course, there's right-wing stuff. Of course, there's an AstroTurf element. Of course, it's everything simultaneously. But I think the point you're making that's important is just the basic reframe, which is that as soon as you can get on national television and talk about this unlimited amount of money that we have to dump, on the business sector, obviously we could give people $2,000-$3,000 a month, give them health care, suspend rent, suspend mortgages, and problem is solved in less than 2 seconds or 5 minutes.
For sure. But where I was going with that was I am extremely inspired by the demonstrations that are clearly working class in character spreading across the country that AOC is talking about. People are demonstrating for safety. They're demonstrating for hazard pay. They're demonstrating for paid time off, healthcare, even just the right to make PPE. And I think these protests deserve a lot more attention than the ones trying to reopen the economy.
Let's
I just
actually,
want to say,
Matt, go ahead.
One quick thing on, this whole celebrating the death of oil. I will celebrate the death of the oil industry. I think as far as like the history of just awful reactionary, power, the oil industry is maybe the worst in human history. As far as the people losing jobs, though, no, I take it very seriously. And I would say if Sarah Huckabee Sanders does as well, she would propose paying those people salaries for 5 years until they find other jobs.